everybody. Here's your quick little 30-second what you're about to hear today. We've got a great guest today. Scott Kelsey is here, a professional hockey player, and today he runs several organizations working in the mental health aspect of sports. But we have a great conversation today, really about youth hockey and the conversations you can have with your kids at youth hockey, conversations you should have with yourself in youth hockey, and really the process, especially in that kind of 12 down age group. We talk about both, but things you can look out for to kind of, not if you're doing it right, but just things to look out for to maybe continue on the journey and see that pathway. The journey of hockey is the whole thing and not just the destination that you're trying to get to. We also talk about how Scott completely pivoted his life after a massive brain injury in 2018 and how he gives back now to athletes and other people by sharing his story, and how creating communities has really been a great pathway for not just him, but other people involved to kind of find a pathway through what they're dealing with in their lives. So really powerful episode. And again, look, if you want to support us or support the show, aside from listening, which we really do appreciate, head over to ourkidsplayhockey.com. Check out the Shop Now button there that's right at the top of the page. We got a lot of deals on there with several companies that we put together for you to support you, supports us, just trying to help whoever we can. So again, that's ourkidsplayhockey.com. Check it out there. We got a little bit of a store on the front page. If you want Our Kids Play Hockey merchandise, let us know somehow. We'll start making that. But without further ado, let's get you into the episode with Scott Kelsey, Mike Benelli, and I on Our Kids Play Hockey. Hello, hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome to another edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. I'm Lee Elias, and joined as always by Mike Benelli. Christy Casciano-Burns is on assignment tonight, but our guest today, Scott Kelsey, is a former collegiate and professional hockey player who played over 350 games as a defenseman in the ECHL, CHL, and UHL. And after moving on from hockey, Scott successfully transitioned to a career in the mortgage industry, working with some of the nation's top mortgage companies. But Scott's story pivoted dramatically in 2018 after suffering a traumatic brain injury. And his focus was shifted greatly towards mental health and taking action to create and be involved with several projects, included but not limited to Shareapy, Edge for Athletes, and the Ranch Teammates for Life. And you'll remember we just interviewed Clint Millarchuk from that organization as well. And the idea is to connect people and to inspire people to use athletics as a way to better their lives outside of sports. Scott is still active in the game today. This is going to be a very good hockey episode as well. He's coaching youth hockey in Princeton, New Jersey. He's also a very proud father, one of us, to two children, 7-year-old Greta, who's playing 8U hockey, and 4-year-old Alex, who, as Scott puts it, is playing with trucks right now, but is projected to be skating at some point in the near future. Scott, welcome to Our Kids Play Hockey.
Thanks, Lee, and Mike, for having me on. Incredible introduction. I might just copy that if you don't mind, and use that for all future references. So great, thank you. Thanks.
We provide a lot. If I will send you the intro written out, you can put that however you want. You just got to update the kids' ages as the years go by. But no, thank you.
When you do your next parent meeting, that could be just your opening monologue right there. Just play that.
Agreed. Or Lee can drive over. He's right down the road.
That's true. We'll do it in a really slow. Scott Kelsey has been serving mankind for years. Now, Scott, so listen, I want to jump into the hockey side of your life quick. We know you hail from New York. You played for Hamilton College before several professional teams in leagues, to be honest with you, that you have to be a workhorse, to survive those leagues. So I'm not asking you for your whole life bio here, but can you tell us the moment or the moments in your life when you knew that hockey was going to be something you wanted to pursue?
That's a great question. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to grow up in a small town in upstate New York, Clinton, that has a pretty rich hockey tradition. And although my parents, my dad was a basketball player and a good baseball player in high school, so they really didn't have, outside of being fans of the Clinton Comets that were up there, the old EHL team, they didn't have much exposure to the game. So early on, without going into too much detail, my brother heard something on the announcement at school about playing hockey. We got involved. I think I was probably 6 or 7 at the time. So, my parents were very supportive and always been supportive. So they, bought us a gear, put us on the ice, and that kind of started our hockey journey. So, had the fortune of playing for some really good coaches up there. A lot of the guys that had skated in that minor league had stayed around town. So very rich hockey tradition. I think, we had a lot of success in youth, right? New York's a pretty good powerhouse in terms of, youth hockey, high school hockey. Obviously has a fair share of good college teams as well. So I really think if I look back at it, probably, Pee Wee Bantam age, right when you're starting to get, kind of thinking about if you're going to play high school. And then going into high school, I had some pretty good success in youth sports, playing with some good teams, traveling all over, the Northeast at the time, sometimes to international tournaments and across the border and stuff. But I think there was one point, and now that I think about it, is I got cut. I didn't make it freshman year, and this isn't a Michael Jordan story that I sat there and shot 58 pucks into a a washer and dryer like Sid Crosby. But it just it probably at the time shocked me, right? Like it was the first time that I had a little bit of reality that, geez, maybe you're not good enough. And I think my parents probably instilled in me that kind of hey, give it another try next year. And still played some pretty good youth hockey. And then after that, my sophomore year, I made the team, had some pretty good success there, and then just climbed a little bit more in terms of that success ladder, in terms of just being part of good teams and being a pretty I think a pretty instrumental part of those teams. Got my eyes and head thinking about college hockey. So and then from there, it's probably about that age, probably sophomore year in high school, where I was like, geez, you know what? Not only can I potentially continue to play, but maybe somebody will pay my way to college for me to do so. So I would say probably in those mid-teen years is where I really kind of thought, hey, there might be something to this game outside of just youth sports.
This is fascinating. And how old were you when you said you started?
I would say sixth, the youngest.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the reason I asked that is that I love the way you described that, because it was this journey of discovery from 6 to really 16, the way you said it. And I'm also saying 16, it just sounds better than 18 when I say 6. But the point is this, one of the things that we don't see today is that explanation, because there's so much social media, there's so much out there about making it and college and pro, that I don't even know if we're allowing our kids to discover the journey of exploring the game as a possibility, right? It's almost from moment one, well, there's the destination. And I don't think that's how it works. And again, I've heard similar stories, Scott, from actually reading Mike Irizoni's book, right? You sound just like him. Like, I didn't even know if I was going to be good enough to make it. And then here you are, you played 350 plus games in professional hockey. And again, for everybody listening, if you play one game of professional hockey, you're pretty darn good. All right. Doesn't really matter. Mike and I talk about this all the time with like NHL players, where kids go, that guy sucks. And it's like, no, that guy's the best hockey player you've ever played with if you get on the ice with that guy. Right. So I just wanted to emphasize that this was a journey of discovery, that there are moments along the journey, some of them painful, that allowed you to realize, wow, this is something I want to pursue. We will get to kind of the later part of your life where you have some other discoveries later in the episode, but I think that's just a really important thing to bring up.
Yeah, Scott, real quick, like where was like I'm assuming you get cut, you think you're a pretty good hockey player, and I'm assuming mom and dad didn't, the first thing they didn't do is blast off, going to the coach and screaming and yelling and saying how, it was their fault that you didn't make the team. So just maybe a little bit right there, in your experience, and even now that you're in kind of the youth hockey world as well, but just that ability, like Lee was saying, to kind of find that motivation yourself, like to somebody to say, hey, listen, you be accountable. You want to get better, you've got to work and you've got to do it. Like, I can't do this for you. I think, back when you played, and certainly when I played, like, I didn't have the option to look on YouTube and get private lesson instructors.
But I'm in that group too, Mike. I'm not that young.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't want to age you. I didn't want to age you, but
sorry, go ahead.
But I just think it's one of those things where, like, now, like, a kid doesn't make a team, and the first thing a parent does is they throw them into 100 different skills camps and get a private trainer and a coach, and they don't even know if the kid wants it. Like that explorer, finding it themselves, which it sounds like you did.
Yeah, this is how long do we have here today? Because that could be a week long
Do a
discussion.
6-part
No, well,
miniseries.
Yeah.
we've been doing the podcast for 2 years, so it does take a long time
Yeah,
to
no, I
decipher
think
it.
where I think I did benefit, and you'll hear it a lot. And who knows? I think individually, everybody has their own journey, and I'm not going to sit here and say that, hey, somebody was telling me, oh, you're going to grow out of your failures and all the stuff we hear today, which I think is true, right? In terms of mistakes you make and those times where you might not, I don't know if when I was a 14, 15-year-old, if I really was like reading some self-help book saying, oh, don't worry about it, just learn from it and grow. I was probably angry. I was probably upset. I was probably a little embarrassed. Right. And I don't know how that factored into motivating myself. I wasn't climbing stairs like Rocky or, shooting a million pucks, like I said. But I think one of the things, if it makes sense in terms of that, is I played other sports and I was probably just as good, if not better, of a baseball player.
Hmm.
And growing up and through high school. And I also played football up until it's I think junior year of high school, where I had a little bit of a knee problem, and the coaches, and it just made sense for me not to risk playing football. So I think having those other two, in terms of having other sports to lean on, and still, at least have 2/3 of the year, or at least half of the year taken with other sports, and then obviously having some time off during the summer. I think that helps, right? I think, there is a lot of focus, as we see these days, in terms of one sport athletes, and it's all over the board. I obviously, depending upon who you talk to, you can slant it either way. There is obviously proven success for kids, whether they're, going through the system now in the development program, or colleges, or in the NHL, that had success being a one sport athlete. But for me, my story and my experience was just that, maybe it softened the blow a little bit to be able to have those other sports to focus on and rely on, with knowing that hockey was there if I wanted it. And obviously I had the opportunity the following year and still played club hockey, and just kind of, that helped bridge the gap in terms of maybe mentally and just getting through that, setback, so to speak.
Scott, I'm going to jump to this question because you're alluding to it. You wrote about the importance of taking a break in sports seasons and this is how you wrote it. And I want to emphasize it: personal athletic development. So taking a break for personal athletic development. So I want to unpack that, because in hockey, the way hockey's built right now, there's always the next thing. There's the spring league, then the summer league, and then the pre-tryout thing, and then the tryout thing, and then it just keeps going. And naturally too. Look, parents want to do that. Kids want to be with their friends. There's a lot of reasons to string you along, but it can be tough for parents and even tougher for the kids to say no. Right. So how do you approach that? How do you think we should approach that? And again, keeping in mind, personal athletic development from breaks are important.
Yeah, I mean, I could, it's interesting because, and going back a little bit in history, after I stopped playing, I coached youth hockey for about 8 to 10 years, everywhere from mites up through prep school. So I got a pretty good exposure, post career for me in terms of that. And I took a break myself, right, from coaching, to try to build the career and just take a break. I think I needed it. I think a lot of things have changed and since then, but I'm glad that I dove back into it the last year or so. Obviously with my daughter wanting to be involved, that was very random. It's not because I played hockey. She came home one day, and I think as a 6-year-old, if you can have a crush on a kid, she had a crush on a hockey guy, or a kid, so she wanted to play hockey. But I think taking a break for me, it worked for me. A lot of folks that I know it worked. I think there was a lot of benefit for me playing other sports. Not only in terms of skill development, but also just it's a long season, whether you're any season, whether it's soccer, football, lacrosse. I mean, I think a lot of time and effort's put into that season, and I think you just need to decompress. So I just remember, being really looking forward to, football season getting over, so then I could strap on the hockey gear, and then hockey season getting over, so I could strap on the baseball gear. I just had excitement in all of them. And, it wasn't like I was, way ahead of my time looking to round out my skills. It was just something that my parents felt that we needed a break, and my dad being a baseball lover, or a good baseball player, maybe, maybe that had something to do with it, or probably did. But I think It's really hard. Like you could argue both. You know, for me personally, my suggestion or what I'm going to try to do with my kids the best I can is just give them the space and the opportunity to explore whatever they want. Like our daughter, I've showed up at practice this year without my daughter with me. You know, if she has something going on and it's too much that day, you know, I let her pass. But I do try to speak with her about her commitment this year and being in a team and make her understand that, other kids might, miss her or, and try to have fun with it. But it's a really touchy subject, right? Because
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can you can upset a lot of people. And I think like with everything else in life in general, if I just use the words in my experience, then how can they fault you, right? I'm talking from
Right.
experience. It's my experience. People are going to make the choice to put their kids in these clinics and spend the time and money to do so. I just would hope that my guidance would be just have a really good gauge on your kids as best you can, right? And not worry about what, your neighbor's kids doing or whatever the other kids are doing and just, go down that path and see what happens. And if your child, takes a particular liking to the sport, maybe throw in some additional stuff, and see, but don't, I think throwing the kid into, head on into full-time any sport gets a little bit risky in terms of not only development, but also their mental kind of, their mental state with anything in terms of athletics.
I tell you, it's so funny that you say that because I was just having that conversation with a couple of parents the other night, just about what they see and what the reality is, and I think we fall into this in our new world of the everybody being an open book apparently online, and I was laughing at this one parent that posted a picture of his kids, like having some great clinic in the morning, like it was one of those like 6 a.m. Get up before posting that it's -8 degrees and they're making the trek. And I was at the rink that morning and I watched these two kids come in crying, bitching, moaning, miserable. Like I said, I didn't see any of that video on Facebook. All I saw the drills by the time they got out there. But it's so funny how I think, to your point, everybody has to know their own kid, and if you start if you think you're seeing another kid's success online and you think it's because of something, don't worry about them. Worry about, what's your threshold? Is your kid, can they get up at 6 a.m.? Can they stay up till 10:30 p.m.? Can they function on zero sleep? I mean, it's all about, what your kid, and I agree with you. There are certain kids that just in any sport that take to it, love it, find it, play it, excel at it, don't excel at it, just love being there. And I think what we can't fall into the trap that because I saw somebody online doing, you don't really know the full picture. You don't really see this full story. And I say it to, the guys I work with all the time. Like when you see these kids on social media doing like the trick shots and the, catching, pucks in the air. And I said, that kid probably practiced that like 700 times. I mean, they probably missed 3 days of school to catch that puck. And I said, just, it doesn't happen the first time. And a lot of our kids go, I can't do it. I couldn't do that. Well, you've been out for 5 minutes. you haven't done it. You haven't built the foundation to where that kid is. And I'd say that all the time, even then when I do a lot of drills, like, oh my God, your kids are doing that drill or that game. And it looks so great. I go, yeah, but we're like 4 months in. Like that drill started with like a basic catch and pass.
Yeah.
And now it looks like something, right? But let's look back on how it started. You can't just implement that because you saw it. And that's the same thing I think you're trying to say, right? Is that, that I'm hearing is that like, wherever you can gauge your kids, gauge them. You still got to push them. Like, so the fact is they're kids. You got to say, hey, you made a commitment. We're going.
Right.
But maybe missing, the school concert might not be the time to institute, because our kids are all in on a lot of things, right? They're not just in on
Mike, you'd hope so. I mean,
one sport.
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say you'd hope so, right? And Scott, to your point too, like, look, there's a lot of different branches to this tree. In sports, there's other sports. I think it's also important to recognize that, hey, maybe your kid plays an instrument. Maybe your kid does something outside of sport and instruments. Like there's a glee club, acting, singing. I mean, whatever it is, there's a lot of different things in life at that age. And you know, I think it's important too. And we all have, everybody I've met has a challenge with this, is you got to apply, you know, would you be able to handle this as an adult? Right. I always like, would I be able to handle this much of this or something as an adult? And it's like, most people don't want to go to work every single day, and they do it for years. And we take vacations and we try and take breaks. And by the way, God bless anyone who's not. All right. You're working your butt off. Maybe you're supporting your kids in this game, but it's tough for us. So it's even harder from at least an emotional, mental standpoint, I think, sometimes for the kids. And the other thing too, and Mike, I would love for you to touch on this too with Scott, is that there's this irrational fear that the kid's going to lose talent or skill if they take a few months off. A few things. If your kid loves the sport, they're not going to lose too much, right? I mean, yes, they'll be rusty for a week.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's going to happen. NHL players take off time, right, from being on the ice. Two is that's not a reason to not take a break. It's a fear of loss of skill, right? Especially if you're playing other sports, you're going to be well-rounded anyway. But like, that's the kind of, well, if he or she stops playing now, they're not going to be ready for October. And it's like, it might be okay. That is one of the benefits of having tryouts earlier, right? So anyway, I wanted to throw that out to you too as well.
Yeah, Scott, you know, one of the things I was saying, I'd love to hear your thought on this though, is like all of us are trying to get our 8 and our 6, 8, 10-year-old, you know, up to that next level, right? You know, prepared for the next level. And I've been, my biggest thing I've been trying to get across to people is like, yeah, but all this work, ultimately we want them playing at 16. Like if all this work now is not doing us any good if they quit, and the statistics are not on our side. 13 years old, that's it. Like that's when kids quit any sport. It's when it gets to the point where they can make a decision, when they can influence the parent more than the parent can influence them, and when they can just put their foot down. It's like, I do not enjoy this. Like this is not something I like. And I think that's where, you know, so I think that rush to, you know, professionalize our kids and to make them feel like adults, the only people that can combat that and fight that with you are people that have done it. Like it was so funny. I was talking to a coach yesterday. They're like, you know, it's almost like you wish you could have a kid make all your mistakes and then have another kid like 10 years later and say, okay, you know, and I try to do that as a coach, a mentor, an administrator. Like I try not to come off as I know everything. I try to come off as I'm just going to let you know what my experience has been, just like you, Scott, and what I've seen. And then you could frame it any way you want. But at the end of the day, you have to make that decision. But I'm just letting you know wherever your kid is now, you know, the college coach that sees them at 8 is not writing them in the notebook and saying, go look for that kid down the road. You know, that's going to be a kid I'm going to recruit. Just this doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, those are great points. I think you know, especially at the younger years, right? 12U, 10U, 8U, 6U. Is that, you know, there's certain core competencies, right? With anything, right? I mean, and if I look at it, like unfortunately or fortunately, I had knee replacement a couple of weeks ago, so I've been off the ice.
Oh, God bless you.
It's given me a that's 6 surgeries in after a long career, but
yikes.
It's interesting because it's given me the ability to sit in the stands a little bit and talk to some of the parents and just hear kind of the concerns, right? Because we're wrapping up our season in the 8U and most stages in the next couple of weeks, and then you have maybe a break, and then you got a little bit of tryouts, and you got kids going up, and you know, but and I can see the progression, and I hope my parents are pretty satisfied with where we've been this year, but I think certain core competencies, right? Like, you know, in any sport, like skating, right? You know, where you can work on some of those that don't need to be in a full 1 week hockey camp, right? You know, do some fun lessons or something like that. But I think outside of just the physical competencies, stick handling, you know, and I'm not even talking about playmaking stuff, just stick handling, being comfortable with the puck, understanding a little bit about your skating and the game itself. But to work on more and I'm not a child development specialist, right? But there's something that goes on here that you need to be concerned with when those kids are that young, right? And they're that impressionable, you know, and that goes right down from the coaches and obviously up through the parents and such that you need to work on, which, you know, it's like, you know, with the bigger picture stuff, like it's okay to fail, or, you know, I like to say we don't win or lose, we win or learn, right? You know, and try to just impart a little bit of that. Like my discussion with my daughter is probably 2 or 3 questions in the car. Once I know that her head has already gone to the next birthday party or dancing that night, it's done. We don't recap it. We don't go through film. You know, she's 7 years old. But I do think that trying to get to your point, sorry, I can get tangential sometimes, is that, you know, you can do more damage than good sometimes in terms of pushing kids into something if they're really not, you know, asking for it, right, themselves. If they're really not out there saying, I want to do this, want to do this, want to do this. Because I don't think kids, in my opinion, I don't think kids have that comparison syndrome too much figured out, you know, where they have to do it because Johnny's doing it or because, you know, George is doing it. I think that if they really love it and they want to do something, they'll try it, versus the parents, you know, thinking, you know, in order to get to that 8U team, not only 8U team, but the, you know, AAA 8U team, you know, we're going to have to do 6 clinics this summer, and you're going to give up your time at the pool, and you're going to have to do this. I think that's where you can really get into not more physical harm, but more mental, you know, maybe scarring kids in terms of, you know, putting them that they have to perform at this level and they have to do this to succeed. I think at those ages, and I was telling my parents yesterday during the game, you know, I had a couple conversations, is, you know, while they might be locking in skating right now, they feel they've progressed in a playmaking, and it's all the, you know, it's a composition of all those things, right? And they're 6 and 8 and 10, right? At summertimes they'll figure it out, and if they figure out they don't like the game, you know, that's fine. Let them take a pass on it. I just think forcing anything at that early of an age can lead to, like you had said, 13, if that's the age, that's pretty darn young. So you've invested all this time into your kids, and then they get burnt out. It's not, obviously it's more common than uncommon, that it's a very fine line that you have to toe with those kids at that underage, you know, under the 12 and you know, the 8, 6, 8, 10, 12U, that you got to be very mindful of what's going on, not only on the ice, but off the ice.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you know, when you invest all that, you know, your kid at 13 says he wants to quit, you want to strangle him. I mean, it's like, you know, what do you mean? What do you mean you want to quit? I've invested all this in you. Like, I've given you this gift. I brought you to camps. I brought you to clinics. And it's so funny how we refer to it as like a transactional kind of, you know, progress. It's not. It's listen, I'm going to provide you whatever you love to do. Me as a parent, my job is to, you know, get you exposed to as many different things that you can find and like, whether it's art, music, sports, football, basketball, hockey, and then just be the bumper, right? And just kind of keep on track, and hopefully they like to me, I joke around my guys all the time, I just want you to like something I like, because then I can like going to it. Like, I don't want you to, like, I'm not sure if I would like, you know, there's certain things I just don't like, you know. So I said, I'll still love you, and I'll still enjoy watching you, and I'll still love, you know, cheering for you, whatever it is, but there's stuff I'm just not a big fan of, you know. So I might not be as inclined to push it on you,
Right.
you know, and really like say, oh, let's go to, you know, let's make sure you're in band camp for the next 3 weeks. You know, I'm not doing that,
Well,
but maybe I should, you know, and I think it's just,
hey,
but
passion's
to your point,
passion, Mike.
well, it's just
You know, like,
wherever that kid finds that,
right.
like, that's
Yeah.
one thing I know my parents were always with me. They're like, we don't care what you're passionate about. Just be passionate about something.
Right.
Like, just find passion. Whatever it is, it is. Just find whatever that passion is and be proud about it, and we'll support you 100%. And I think, you know, it just happened to be hockey and you know, youth kind of development. But I think it's but I think to your point, Scott, you know, having the opportunity to talk to your parents about, listen, my job here is just to be the guardrails and to provide the skill, because I know that's one thing I can transmit to your kids. I can show them how to hold a stick. I can show them how to make a pass. I can show them how to make a pivot. Maybe not now for a couple of weeks, but you know, there's a lot of things I can do for you. And then your job, mom and dad, is to support me and support our mission together, right? So that your kids can find their way. But I think that's so crucial at that age. It's just, you know, and that age, I think it's unfortunately getting younger and younger and younger, where you allow kids to just explore. Like, we're taking it away, I think, just so much quicker than we need to.
Mike, look, I always like to try and make myself vulnerable, because like the internet, this isn't a human highlight reel. Even being a host on this show, I experience the anxieties at times of being a hockey parent. I make the mistakes, even though I hear you and Christy and our guests in my head. And, you know, my greatest fear coming into youth hockey which I think we've gotten past, was that, man, I really hope the kids love the game. Like you just said, Mike, because I love the game, but I don't want them to feel like they have to play this game because I did. Now, I think we're past that. The kids enjoy it. And now I'm realizing that my greatest fear as a hockey parent or as a parent of a kid in athletics is that they will leave the game one day thinking, man, that was so stressful, or that was so much anxiety. You know, and again, they're not me. I think this is another thing about parenting that, was a real big realization for me. Like these kids, we always say, well, you got that from your mother, you got that from your father. My kids are not me, and they're not my wife. They're their own person, right? They have aspects of us from a DNA level, all right, and they're similar to us, but they're not us. I've experienced the game of what a joyous, wonderful gift the life lessons I got out of the game were. That's always how I viewed it. My fear is my kids will not experience it that way as well. Now it's on me. That's on me and my wife to make sure that doesn't happen, right? From a parental standpoint. But I think that, and I want to kind of compartmentalize this for our audience. Under 13 years old, or and Scott, I'm going to point this at you for your expert opinion on this. What are the bullet points of you should be listening for this? You should be looking out for that. You should be checking yourself as a parent or as a coach on this at that age of maybe it's just too much, right? Like, what are we looking for as parents and coaches at that age from ourselves and our kids to make sure that they're having a good experience at that age level?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think like anything else, just have communication with your kids, right? It doesn't need to be, sit them down for 20 minutes after the game and go through every single shift and why they do this versus that. I think just having, proper communication with your kids and in terms of how the game went and how they felt, and even before the game, kind of what's going on, just to kind of put them in that mindset that they could be open and honest with talking with you, because sometimes kids, are pretty reserved, but don't try to force it out of them. Right. But have that communication and obviously support. And, I try to, with our kids, whether it's my daughter or the other kids team, just try to, go, whether we lose 17-1 or whether we, win, we don't kind of keep score, even though the kids do in their head. But, try to go in there and leave some positives at the end of the day so they can walk away with that. Because I think, at that age, a lot of the times those kids' minds are already on to the next thing they're doing that day, right? But you still want to leave that impression, every single time they're on the ice, of that they got something out of it, whether it's just time with their friends, whether it was being silly with the coaches, playing a new, something new on the ice, or whether it's a game in terms of what they took out of it or kind of how they felt, right? It's not a deep dive, trust me. And I wouldn't expect any parents to kind of go in there and have a stock 4 or 5 questions after every time. Just kind of get a feel for the kid in terms of if they're enjoying it. And some days they may not, right? Some days they may not. And then just kind of take the kid's temperature, both, most of the time, and you guys probably see it, with younger kids, sometimes it's dragging them to get to these early game slots, right? But it doesn't mean that you still can't have that conversation both before and after the game to get them kind of pumped up a little bit and excited about being with their friends and getting a chance to be on the ice. I don't think at that time, you're thinking about what life lessons am I going to learn out of this, but that comes over time, right? So, every single time they step on the ice or step in the locker room, hopefully they're gaining something good, bad, and different that, they basically file, somewhere that they can that they can go back to, right? And I think that just create the biggest positive experience with your kids. Listen to what they say, have a conversation. Don't sit there and talk to them for 40 hours and what went wrong and what they can do better, but really have an open line of communication with your kids about just how they're feeling. Because I tell my daughter every time we go on the ice, 2 objectives: have fun, skate hard, have fun. That's it. If she can do that, especially the have fun part, then it's a win for the day. So yeah, I don't have any specific, recipe. I just think, your kids, but especially with whatever they're in, band camp, jazz, dancing, gymnastics, or hockey, just have that line of communication and don't, and let them speak, right? Just ask the question, let them speak, and take their feedback. And if you're intelligent enough, then, you're going to know your response, right? And it shouldn't be from a negative standpoint. It should be something that encourages further participation and just reemphasize the fact that they got to spend an hour or so on the ice with their kids and, gain from it.
Scott, I think it's also important to note that your focus is on the child and how they are feeling and how they are reacting and reading the temperature, as you said.
What
Mike,
about my feelings?
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say this, Mike. So your story before is actually quite telling. I mean, and I want our audience to hear this because this should be a little bit of a alarm clock going off, right? You talked about the parent who was posting about the grind of getting to the 6 a.m. game or practice, but the kids were miserable, right? So the need to share that I'm grinding trumped in that situation the emotion of the kids in a way. All right. We've all been there. We've all been to that practice. All right. But the need to tell everyone, hey, look at us grinding to get here in the cold in the morning trumped probably her kids' feelings in that moment or his kids' feelings in that moment. To me, I check myself with that. Right now, I don't post a lot about my kids, but I think, am I doing this for me or am I doing this for them right now? And I think that's a constant question, Scott, that we should all be asking ourselves. Because look, we're human too. We can get lost in it. I'm proud of my kid all the time. He plays net. It's exciting, but it's not about me. But I still have to check myself with that. That's the point I'm trying to make. We're all infallible in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I find myself, if I'm posting stuff, my kids get all over me. But it's more like I think it's on my personal side, it's more like from a business perspective. I'm like, they're kind of like my guinea pigs. Every time I get any, I get my hockey wraparound or my gel stick or my, any of the stuff that I have. I'm like, okay, you're going up on the video. I need you because I can't go grab some other kid from the neighborhood right now. You're
merchandising.
Right here. Do it for me. So I think, for me, a lot of it's just about, but I do try to post, a lot of stuff, a lot of, it's not just my kid, just things that are happening in hockey. That's more positive than negative. Like, this is why we do this. And this is why I have so much fun teaching it this way. Or this is kind of a product that I like because this is the way I would use it if I didn't know anything. Like if I just needed guidance. And I think a lot of our parents, we don't know what to ask for and what to do. And, that next, what can we use or it doesn't always have to be on the ice or it doesn't always have to be with a skills instructor. I was talking to a dad of a 15-year-old and a 7-year-old the other day, and they were asking about the 15-year-old. I said, no, this skating class is perfect for them. It's very technical. It's very, they really gonna have to think when they're with the coach and they can process that. They're 15 years old. That player is going to be able to process that. You're a 7-year-old, go to public session and play tag with them. That's the best power skating you do. So, because they're not going to be able to process all the nuances of where you want your ankle flexion and knee and hip and like that. That is just not, again, are there 7-year-olds that can? Yes. Know your kid. Most, and I think to your point, Scott, about talking about, when I found that at this age, like that 6 to, let's say 10, it's the transitions that kill these kids, that get us all crazy. Like the from home to church, from soccer to lacrosse, from school to, from snack time to this time, getting off the TV to getting homework done. Transitions at this age is where we all battle, I think, as parents, is the kids doing one thing and then asking them to do something else. And I think, Lee, we've talked about it a lot of times on the podcast, like, well, we have to do a better job then of understanding what that timing is. Mm-hmm. Like if the transition is getting up, I mean, my son, he coaches me a lot, my younger guy. He's like, well, Dad, if you got me up an hour earlier, I'd be much more prepared for the early practices.
Right.
Instead of you just getting me up 15 minutes before we have to go. I don't have time to prepare.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
Like, an hour earlier, I can't get up an hour earlier. Like, I'm trying to sleep in too. So I can get up and I can go.
Right.
Like, I can literally get up, put a hat on and go to work. But my little guy's like, well, no, I'd rather you get me up earlier and then I can ease into the day. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, I have to realize that. And I think that's I think I see a lot of that in a lot of kids.
We realized pretty quickly in my home that just put the thing down and move on was not going to work. And we have a whole process with, hey, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds. And it better be off when we come in, or it's now you have a punishment situation. But it took us a while to get to that. And they're kids, they're kids. They haven't learned this yet. We can't expect kids to be adults. That's just not how it works. They have to come to that stuff gradually. Scott, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that's a great point, Mike, that transition, because you see it, right? Like especially and I applaud. We have one kid skating and the other, Alex, comes around and watches, right? He might get on the ice the next year or so if he wants. But these parents that have 2, 3, 4 kids playing, right, jumping around to 50 different rinks, right? And as much as it's the kid, hopefully it's a kid's choice to want to play hockey, right, at that early age, or continue to play hockey. That obviously as parents, we're like key in everything, right? And you said it earlier, like it's not about us, right? It's not about us. And I know, like I get into that as well, and I try to pull myself out of that kind of crazy thinking every now and then, where I get upset at something, that whether it's like my daughter's dragging to get in the car and I'm realizing I got to get there before and I should be there before because I'm the coach and I could, just check in with the kids and stuff. But you see it, like if you're not prepared yourself, right? And I'm not saying you have to get up at 4:30 in the morning for an 8 o'clock game. If you're not prepared yourself and you can't sit down and just take a deep breath and say, listen, I'm fortunate enough and blessed enough to be able to do this for my kids, and make it about them versus you, and not say, oh geez, I'm dragging you around to these 50 different rinks, and why don't you, kids don't understand that. They just hear tone of voice and they probably like, I'm doing something bad, which just puts them further into a shell in terms of inhibiting whatever sort of joy they're going to have that day, right? And then the transition, I think it's very, but yeah, I'm so glad that I'm coaching again. I had said that, I just want to be the dad in the stands reading whatever, the Wall Street Journal. And I don't read the Wall Street Journal, but reading whatever, maybe looking at my phone.
We'll make it look good. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
make it look good, but I'm so glad I'm coaching again because I get a whole different perspective, and I'm glad that I get to talk to the parents and have the time to see my kid coaching. But it's it's a little bit of mental judo at times, right? In terms of realizing it, myself, like I'm there to coach 9 or 10 kids. And if my daughter's just not on that day in terms of mentally, I can't let her distracting me get in the way of coaching the other kids.
Well, and that's that parent coaching piece, right? Like my son will always ask me, like, I'm like, come on, we're late. He goes, are we late for being early, or are we late? Like, are we late for you being late, or are we late for me getting on the ice late?
You have your hands full. How old's your son? Right. How old is he?
He's 9. So, but I'm like, listen, we're late for me being there. I run the program. I need to be there. I need to set the boards up. I need to direct the parents. Unfortunately, because it's one of us going, I'm not, your mom's not taking you 45 minutes later. You're going with me. So I'll get the question. So there's always a fishbowl, like, are we late because you're late? Like, are we late for being early? I'm like, yes, that's the standing.
No, that's late. That's late. You have a responsibility and you're late if you're not there on time. That's
right. But my responsibility shouldn't fall on his responsibility. Well, so he gets dragged along by being the coach's son. Right. In a negative way. Now, we've been trying to do certain things to help with that, but that's a lot of it, I think, I try to get other parents to understand that, like, listen, like, I'm here for your kids 100%, but I have a kid too. And my kid is just as finicky as your kid. Like, when your kid doesn't want to go, you just don't go. When my kid doesn't want to go, I have to go. Right. Like, I don't have, but Mike, I'll tell you have a lot of choices there.
And I'm talking about a gut check I had. And then Scott, I want to turn the episode towards the work that you do, because I think it's important that we discuss that. But I remember like I call these trigger moments in my own brain where I have to rethink things. And we kind of have been alluding to this. I remember I started having this thought of, you kids are going to make me late. And I remember as soon as I thought that, I was like, that's not right. Right. It's not their fault. And I turned it inward. I said, it's my fault because I'm not anticipating their behavior. I'm like you said, I can put the hat on and leave. That is not fair to them. Right. They need the extra 30 minutes. So it's on me to get them up 30 minutes earlier. Now, with that said, these little kids, expletive deleted, will still manage to find a way to elongate this process. But it is a lot easier when I have that extra half an hour and keep them on track. So look, it's a give and take. It's a balance. Everyone's got to work together, but you also got to look at your own situation and say, okay, look, is 15 minutes honestly enough time for a 9-year-old to get his or her stuff together? Because we do that, right? Yeah. Everyone listening, you've got to do that on your own. Some of you have kids that just pop out of bed. I know it. I'm just saying, we all have to gauge that differently. There's no perfect parents. Scott, go ahead, and then I want to dive into your work.
Yeah. No, yeah, I can only think back. My dad gave me an option, thinking back, and I'm not suggesting this for people, but he had, it was our first like practice. When I was probably squirts maybe, is that I was so nervous about not making it. My dad's like, you got to wake up on time. If you're going to go, you got to wake up and I'll take you. And I'm sure he would have taken me if I didn't wake up on time, but I was so nervous that I actually got dressed in my hockey gear and went to bed that night. So,
Responsibility.
There
you go.
Yeah. So I'm not suggesting that because, but I do think, you got to know your kid, right? You're obviously around them much more than your coaches are. And you need to know and factor in some of that stuff. I mean, all have a million things going on, right?
Right.
And you start throwing in more variables with multiple kids playing this and your daughter going here and daughter going there, that, you've got to plan ahead like with that, it just saves that last minute frustration, which kids can read, right? Like, you get frustrated, the kids read it,
some toy with it. Toy with it, Scott.
Yeah, you don't start the day right. Like if it's me and I get up and I don't get a chance to go get a coffee before I go on the bench,
right?
I sometimes might get agitated, but I can't try to let my daughter see that.
Preach, Scott. Everyone listening knows that.
But again, we talk about that all the time. It's all about just being prepared and communicate, right? Like if I'm going on a fishing trip, I can tell you right now, I'm not packing the morning I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go on the trip. It's packed like 3 days ahead of time. Like I know where everything is.
But if you were 9, if I was 9,
well, I tell, listen, if we're getting up super early, guys,
right?
Pack your bag, put it by the door. Everything's there. You just pick it up and go. So the minute you could be dead asleep, I don't care. You're just picking your bag up and getting in the car, and instead of putting everything in off the the hangers, and God forbid you forget something because you're just not awake. We've talked about this a lot on the show, just about being, just finding ways for your kids to be successful.
Right.
It falls on you, and then you trial and error. Hey, listen, if you got to get dressed the night before and sleep in your gear,
right,
do it. Not at 15. I wouldn't suggest that with a 15-year-old because this stuff stinks.
This is how you avoid. This is how you avoid the. How did you forget your skates?
How'd you forget those?
How'd you forget the skates?
They're still hanging in the. They're just hanging in the room.
You need those.
Yeah.
Scott, I want to pivot here. I think it's really important we bring this up in the episode. Excuse me. In 2018, you suffered a traumatic brain injury that was a pivotal moment in your life. And we said it before, you played over 350 games of pro hockey. I'm sure you faced plenty of adversity and injury during that time. So what about 2018 spawned you to rethink things and really pivot your life?
That's a good question. Yeah, my injury was in April that year. It was so severe. I don't recall, probably 3 or 4 months after, give or take, things here and there. But I do recall that, I worked with a great neurologist, and he had talked about it being, he mentioned to me saying, hey, this is probably going to be one of the toughest injuries you ever had, if not the. And I said, why is that? And he said, nobody can see it. Right. So I was scared, right? I was scared in terms of, I'd had previous concussions. I probably dropped the gloves way too many times when I was playing, just to kind of keep a spot or just to kind of protect people that were much more talented than I. But long story short is, when I started to look back at it, I was worried about what my future looked like, right? I had 2 young kids. Alex was just born, or he wasn't actually born at the time. My wife was pregnant with him at the time of my injury, and our daughter was 2.5. And I started to get scared in terms of, what lie ahead, right? Especially when you look at all the CTE and the post-concussion syndrome and stuff like that. Like, geez, I've really got to be a little bit more proactive in terms of how I take care of myself, right? And that the rehabilitation out of a brain injury, like, is okay. Not too much light, focus, like limit your inputs, right? Like, so I didn't work for a while. I just had to slow things down, and then slowing things down made me realize that I had a lot of things coming at me. And whether it's the athlete in me, whether it's that competitive nature, whether it's just that I got lucky that over the years that I was able to achieve some success both on the ice and outside in the business world, that I still was handling too much, and I needed to slow down, and I wasn't taking care of myself in the ways that I could have. Like, I was diagnosed mid my career, 94, 95, with some anxiety and depression. I just kind of blew that off, and I didn't handle that properly for the next 20 plus years. So it made me realize that I just didn't take time. I was focused on, some goal of success. And I couldn't even tell you at the time what that was, right? It just seemed like I hit one milestone, I'd go for the next and the next. And I always knew I was somewhat friendly, good in relationships, but the one thing I didn't have was a true awareness of what was going on with me. And once I had the time and took the time, and I needed to take the time to recover from this injury, to try to identify some of those things and why things are going on inside of me, and that I wasn't taking care of, and how to properly take care of them to give myself the best chance to recover, but also lead a more meaningful life and be around for my kids. Right. So that, without going too long into it, I started thinking of all these things I would wanted to tell my kids that I didn't have a chance to tell them, should I had, not been found when in the time I was by my wife, and had a chance of, bleeding out and dying. So I just started thinking about that and saying, you know what, I've got to first take care of myself, and not in a selfish way, but in terms of giving myself the best chance to recover from this injury, but also dealing with some of the other deficits that I hadn't taken care of throughout the previous 20 years, because life comes at us hard, and I could handle it for a while. And a lot of things look rosy on the outside, right? Nice house in Princeton, made some good money, I was blessed to do a lot of good things and be around a lot of good people. But at some point that could have been a big crash and burn. And I, through the accident and through the injury, it just gave me the opportunity to address things that I need to address at the time and continue to address. And I think it just put me on a more solid foundation to help others out there. And that's kind of where, my next chapter is kind of birthed out of that instance.
Well, I was going to say, look, that's exactly what you did, because as you said, look, you were a successful hockey player in many ways, and you're successful in the mortgage business. But since that injury, you've been involved, created some incredible organizations. Just to mention again, Shareapy, Edge for Athletes. We know you're involved with the Ranch, Teammates for Life. I'm not even sure what else you're involved with, but can you walk us through those organizations and associations and tell us maybe the meaning behind them, what they do, and then why they're important to you now?
Yeah, I'll go on the back end. So in reverse, I guess. So the Ranch, I was asked when I started to get more into advocacy, right? I realized that, having some struggles over the years with my mental health and keeping it to myself really, didn't help anybody. So I started to talk to friends about that, and I started to get involved a little bit more in advocacy. And then I saw Clint posted something, and I knew Clint Malarchuk, I knew his story in terms of his injury, but I didn't know much after that. When I started to dive into it more, I'm like, I need to talk to this guy. And I was like, at least I'll reach out to him. And, by the power of LinkedIn or other methods, I got a hold of him, and he said, yeah, give me a call. And, I talked to him, and he said, I really think you should look at joining this thing we got going on with the Ranch. And that was probably 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. So I think I was asked, just my experience in hockey and my willingness to try to kind of go down that path to help others out who struggle with things post-career, whether it's mental health or other addiction and stuff like that, as I just felt like my experiences could help those. And then obviously my connections in the sports world and just business in general. I think that was my first entree in terms of being asked, and it's been great. It's been a good learning experience. It's a great organization. We're doing some great things, and there's some really good people involved, and more good people every day that want to really see that place succeed and help athletes out there. So that's the Ranch. Edge for Athletes was built, that was framed basically out of the need to start building out. I don't want to get too businessy, but I didn't talk about verticals, up until this past year, but was built out of, or spawned out of the fact that we were going to go pretty deep with athletes, and we've, through Shareapy, and I'll intertwine this through Shareapy, we're all about shared lived experiences and how those can benefit others, right? Being open and honest, non-judgmental, and actually sharing experiences versus something you read in a book or saw online, or that you just are just sharing with somebody that's not from your experience. So true experiences, I believe, are very, very powerful in helping people get through things, right? Whether it's work issues or just things that come into your life. So as we're building
youth hockey,
youth hockey, that's a good community, hockey community.
Yeah.
But no, Shareapy was built in just leveraging human experiences and giving people a platform to share those with other like-minded people. And there's a ton of research and science based at how powerful storytelling is and how powerful sharing experiences are. So we've been building that out the last couple of years, and it's been tremendous in terms of the amount of people that are out there that are caring people that want to help. And where Edge came into play was just starting to work with athletes. A lot of our focus with Shareapy is life stage transitions, coming out of the military, coming out of divorce, coming out of loss of a loved one, and obviously athletics. Right? There's a lot of issues that we see in college and professional athletics. obviously youth as well, where we feel we can make a dent in terms of some of these, in terms of the awareness and work with athletes. So that was basically a proactive way of talking with these college athletes and professional athletes, not saying, hey, your career is going to end one day, you better be prepared for it. Actually taking a softer approach and a more proactive approach to kind of get them thinking about things that they might want to be thinking about while they have the time. I know athletes and student athletes spend a tremendous amount of time and don't, you would think that they don't have any time for anything else, but they do. Like, I know, at least in my experience, you have time for some of these things, and that's everything in the personal development space, self-discovery, all that sort of stuff that I think we can provide, to these athletes. And what we're doing with Edge is we're actually leveraging other athletes' experiences. So we've got a great team of ambassadors, and we're growing that team as we speak. And we have some good affiliations that we're going to be announcing probably in the next couple of months that are really going to jumpstart that organization to help athletes out there. So it's all about really giving people a platform to share their experience, which I know helps the person sharing, on top of how much it helps others out there, right? There's so much unused experience out there that goes untapped, that I think if we can tap into it, like having conversations like this, all the better. And if we can create communities and create communities, whether it's in the athlete community, the military community, or any community out there that needs the resources and support, then we're going to do it.
Scott, you're bringing up some really tremendous points here. I'm writing a lot of notes, and I'm trying to encapsulate this into like the entire experience. When you think about humans in general, the need for us to be around each other is actually a biological evolutionary need. Well, humans are supposed to be around other humans, even introverted, extroverted, it doesn't matter. It's pretty well documented that from an animal point of view, we have to have our packs or our tribes, so forth and so on. In terms of Shareapy, Edge for Athletes, and sharing stories, I love that the conversation's opening up now to do more of that. And if you look at, I don't want to say people with problems, but if you look at people that are suffering, and you look at things like, Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, a group where we share, and a lot of healing comes out of that. And the people that were hurt heal. You look at veterans helping other veterans. You look at hockey parents helping other hockey parents, which is one of the reasons I think this show is so successful, is that we're just having a conversation that a lot of people weren't having. I think there's a lot of power in that. And I think as people, we should look for that. So number one, I applaud you for what you're creating, because it's creating the avenues for that. And there's impact there that have echoes and echoes and echoes that go beyond just one person. But it started with you. The other thing too is this with our kids. And again, you just kind of clicked this in my head, Mike. This goes back to what you were saying. Our kids are watching mostly human highlight reels online. They're not seeing a lot of the failures. And that will instill, and this is true for adults too, it instills a fear of sharing failures or sharing negative experiences, because all you're seeing is highlights, right? You got to be part of the highlight, and you got to break that, because it's not reality. And I think one of the keys to breaking that, as you just said, Scott, is just finding some other people that maybe are going through similar things. It's a lot easier to say, I failed at this, when someone goes, you know what? I did too. Right. And we don't do that enough today. And when you bring it to kids, they're terrified of it. Right. No kid's going to come up to you like, yeah, I really screwed up today. And I mean, not no kid, but you know what I'm trying to say? Like, we don't encourage them to talk to us. And here's the other part of it. Mike, you and I experience this daily. Scott, you too. They don't want to come to their parents and tell them, because the reaction is going to be different. They want friends. So I just think what you're creating is important, but I also think the larger message here is that we need to encourage each other to find groups that are going to provide that support, and have to be okay, parents, when that support is not you, right? I'm always amazed, and you know what? I want to thank my kid for this, and he has no idea he's doing it. My daughter too. That when I step away from my son, and he just plays with his friends, and I love playing with my kid, I love it. But when I step away and he just plays with his friends, I can see it's a different experience for him. He's happier in a lot of ways, and it's fun. And I forget, I'm his parent. You know what I mean? Like, because I'm just having fun on the ice. But I'm getting long-winded now. My point is that we got to recognize what our kids are seeing in ourselves. And most things are highlights right now. There's a lot of powers out there actually trying to pull us apart. What you've created and the people you work with are advocates for that community. And I think that that's insanely important right now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. You talk about it, connection, right? Like you talk about needs. So 3 pillars: growth, connection, contribution, right? As
Write
adults,
that down.
obviously kids need to grow, they need to connect, they need to be around their friends, they need to get exposure to different types of friends, right? Um, that those are 3 key needs outside of, other needs that we have as human beings. And I think, that contribution is like, I'm making a difference, right? Like it
Right.
doesn't mean anything to me. So that connection is it's hard, right? Especially, I mean, as adults, we're getting overwhelmed with, social media and technology, and it impacts our kids. And going directly, like I love the fact that you mentioned like you stepping aside and letting your kid just be a kid.
Yeah.
That's where you encourage creativity, having fun versus some fear of failure, so you don't try something new, right? Especially on the ice. And I think that somehow, whether it's in the classroom or whether it's in on the ice or on the field, that not giving the space or talking to your kids about, hey, it's okay that you didn't win or it's okay that you fell down, gives them a little bit more, I believe, ability to be creative and not, clenching their stick on the ice or being fear
Right.
that, oh my goodness, my dad's gonna, not, drive me home if I, don't shoot this puck correctly or something like that. So I think that's very important in terms of that. But I also think that goes right up the ladder. It goes with adults as well. Like
Absolutely.
if you fear failure, or you fear something, and obviously with social media and you're going to compare yourself against what everything's out there, that's a recipe for a lot of disaster out there. So I think the more we can identify with like who we are in terms of what we need to do to grow and to connect, contribute, and to have some impact out there, the better. And I think it takes talking to other people who either have walked through or are currently going through what you're going through to help, to increase your chances of coming out of it on the other end with learning through something or dealing with it in a more effective way.
Absolutely agree. And again, the community aspect could be faith. It could be a community of people online, anything. Just find a community that's uplifting and that can help you, or shared experience. Right. It's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows in a community either. It's shared experience. And again, going back to like stepping away, I Mike knows this. I stepped away from being on the bench this year. I am happy I did it because my kid's enjoying the game more. And look, like it takes time to be like, hey, I don't blame myself for that. All right. It's one of those things too. Like I think we could forget as parents what we are to our kids. We love them. We want the best for them. I want the best for you. But it's mom and dad to them. I mean, all you got to do is go back to your own mom and dad in your head and how you might have looked at them. It's going to change that conversation. Scott, one more for you. And Mike, if you got more, please jump in too. But in all of my research of you, the articles, the podcasts, one of the things I loved is you use a lot of metaphors from the game to describe life. Now that speaks to me directly as someone who loves hockey. You talk about, I read a great passage from you about gap control on the ice versus life, digging in and not gliding on the ice versus life, etc. On the show, we always talk about hockey as a vehicle for our growth as human beings, right? And I often credit the game with teaching me how to approach life. It sounds like that's the same for you.
Yeah, no, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I do. I mean, it's just part of whether it's through playing or coaching or both. Like that's our speak, right?
Right.
And if you can relate it to life lessons, it's gonna obviously, I'm sure that speak is different with baseball and football, whatever, but it's just an easier way for me to relate it, in my experience. And I think if you're not taking life lessons away from your sport, you may not realize it when you're 6, 7, 8, or 9. Like, I think that's us as parents to be able to start like reinforcing that when they're that young. But if you're not taking something away of it, then you're either not getting coached properly or you just don't enjoy the sport, right? So it's just more of a grind than more of something you're having fun at. But yeah, I truly think like, I don't know, I can think a lot of them. Like, like I just think of when we were talking about creativity, like dump the puck or, dump and change. All these other things pop into my head, and I go back without being too long-winded, during my college career, and I had an incredible coach. But for some reason, one year, like we were so bad breaking out of our end, we would just have to wrap it around the boards. So I was like, man, that killed my creativity, right? But I always think about these expressions, and I think in terms of storytelling, that's what comes into my head sometimes, gap control, things like that. And I think that if you're not able to learn, sports is a big part of my life and a big part of our lives, right? And I think that if you're not able to take away some key points that help you with other aspects of your life, whether it's parenting or in the job, then you're missing something, or something's not being provided to you correctly during your playing years.
Yeah, I always like to refer to Danny Rojas in Ted Lasso, when he says football is life, right? And I said, depending on how you hear that, it could mean two things. You might take that as the sport is all that matters in your life. Or when I say things like that, hockey is my life, I say, it is the metaphor for life, right? The game, and you can apply this to many different sports. The game is a great teacher. And there's so many situations. And I was just talking about this on another podcast about the day I realized that I could apply my effort, my love, my passion, my creativity from hockey to something else. That was a really big eye-opening moment for me. And people are like, well, you didn't know you could do that. No, I didn't. I was so identified as a hockey player that that's the only thing I thought I could apply this to. You know what I mean? And no, it took a snap moment and a lot of things falling apart for me to realize, wait, I'm not limited to the game to do this. Right. And I think you've lived your life in a way that's conducive to that too, man. Like, again, just the way you've opened it up and you've created a place that's going to affect thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, millions of people long term. And that is amazing to me. And I applaud you for that. Go ahead. My bad.
Mike?
Yeah, Mike, do you have anything? Mike, I should have thrown it to you, Mike.
Listen, I always kind of I'm thinking about how this applies with different age groups and when would you implement, how heavy you'd want to have these conversations. I mean, where have you been finding, I mean, is your kind of sweet spot right now, like post player? Is it current athletes and professionals, or is it high school? Like where are you finding this makes the most impact when the parent voice isn't the strongest voice for the person?
Yeah, you know what? I think you can have impact at all different levels, right? I think that might be right now biting off a little bit more than we can chew, right? Our focus has been current collegiate and professional players. But I do see, like, I'm talking with people that are in that space that, that we'll collaborate with, that are that kind of went that route, professional and collegiate, but are actually more ingrained in high school right now. So, and I do think youth sports needs it, right? Like we'll support any and everybody who's there to better, kids' experience. But it's just a matter of what we're tackling now is more collegiate and professional, and probably more collegiate, right? The numbers are just greater there than professional. And I think a lot of it is, like you talked about it, like identity, like, what's portable post-career, post college or post professional career, and taking some of those attributes. And there's a lot of great platforms out there that do it, which is great. I think, the more the better, especially in sports, military, there just needs to be more resources for these people. So we're focused more, I would say, really strongly on collegiate, but also, helping out, people that are in professional in the world in terms of whether it's hockey or whether it's baseball, but football, lacrosse, there's a lot of them nowadays. And if there's, the best part about it is when you're in any space, like you meet other people that are tackling some of those others, like some of the youth and stuff. So I have a tremendous amount of trust in some people that I've gotten to know over the last year or so that really could, if need be, we can send people their way. So
yeah, I think it's interesting because one of the groups I consider a mentor group to me as a coach and a professional is a group I meet with bunch of ex-coaches or some current coaches, and we meet once a week. And one of the things that we keep coming back to is the less need at the youth, like being more proactive, so people aren't getting to the point of where you're rehabbing them, almost like getting ahead of this. And then instead of needing a hockey director as your first point of concern in a youth hockey program, it might be like an ethical director or an emotional director, like somebody that can understand, how to frame a lot of these things for our kids so that we're not getting to the point of they've fallen kind of off the cart. Like how can we prepare our athletes and our parents and our the people that we associate with early on, and then identify those those areas where we have to spend more time instead of saying, well, the answer to all youth hockey is just more power skating classes. Well, the answer might be, let's have a conversation with our teenage players, our 18U kids, about the path and the journey and what you're going to encounter. And then we're going to try to proactively help you navigate that world. And then, of course, there's other support services for you when you do make that mistake or make a decision that wasn't in maybe your best interest to the team's best interest. And I just think that's where, I think what you're doing is where those do combine. Like there is a lot of synergy there for somebody working in the youth world to understand what you're doing post career, so that we can bridge the gap. Okay, where are we missing? Why are we missing certain areas where it gets to the point where somebody feels this anxiety, feels this depression, feels this kind of overwhelming, flood of emotion based off of what we're doing, right? We're doing it at the youth level. Like we're the ones directing these kids. So we certainly have influence on how we approach them and where and kind of how they're reacting to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, I love the term proactive, right? Because that's what we're all about. I mean, whether it's collegiate or professional, and even obviously in youth with people dealing with it, to be proactive, obviously, can ward off a lot of potential issues, right? I think that, we're not around to sit here to try to fix everybody in terms of every single thing, but what we can do through conversation and through discovery is, get people to realize that, oh, maybe I should look into that, or maybe that is accessible to me, right? So you see a lot of in the collegiate world, and obviously in the professional world, you get a lot of mindset coaches. Like there's a lot of now team sports psychologists that are dealing with that. It's just a matter of getting people or the player to ask for that help, right? Like it's there, as a resource, but it's just getting people to identify that maybe that their life or their career at that point in time might be better by speaking with somebody. And I think, we'll see it. And I don't know, it's out there, obviously, like in the development program and some other colleges out there that are attacking, some of this mental wellness head on. Right. And hopefully that, grows to much more exposure in the collegiate level and obviously in the youth level. I think, you don't have to teach kids, I think mindset is key, but, mindset at 8, it's obviously different than 18 than 28, right? But I think it's a key point. And I think a lot of that goes on our shoulders as parents when they're young. And that just, hopefully, if I can help parents out by not being stressed, like I always say, make better the communities in which we live, work, and play, right? I don't want people getting home from work than having to go drag their kid to the rink that had a bad thing going on at work that can't put that thing aside. And then that's the parent yelling at the ref during the game, right? It's just, you got to compartmentalize, sorry, a tongue twister for myself right now, but you've got to be able to compartmentalize that. I'm tackling it again, but I think the better we can create in terms of our communities, hockey community, military community, the better willingness for people to address some of their needs that they may not have thought were needs before, and then provide resources or pointing them in the right direction, a trusted direction to go, then we can better that person, which, bleeds into their other aspects of their life, whether it's coaching hockey, or whether it's parenting hockey, or whether it's even playing hockey themselves. We won't get into the adult men's hockey stories where that can be another episode.
Yeah, I always get freaked out when guys on my men's team share me their live barn highlights from the game I was at. But that is for another episode. Scott, Kelsey, again, circled this on my notes here: growth, connection, contribution. I think we talked about all three of those today. I think it says a lot about who you are. I want to say it again, man. I applaud you for the steps you've taken through your life, not just as a hockey player, but as a person, and the contribution you're making to the people, not just the sport, just the people in general. I think that needs to be celebrated and talked about more. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
No, thanks, guys. I love what you guys are doing. And I've shared what you guys are doing because I didn't want it to seem like, oh, I'm on this podcast, you should listen to it. Right. So hopefully some of my parents are have listened to you guys, and I applaud you guys for all you're doing out there to help the kids and obviously better their experience in the sport.
Well, taking your lead, we're trying to grow the community, right? And that's one of the things that makes this show so great is that all the listeners here, I think we're all experiencing this in real time together, and that's why we find success. So it's a great episode. Scott, Kelsey, you were fantastic. Mike Bonelli, you were fantastic. And this was just another wonderful show, as always. And the audience listening can't thank you enough. You are just the best, and you keep us going every single week, and the community that we're growing here is important. If you want to be part of that community, there's several ways to do it. Head over to Facebook, find our private group called Our Kids Play Hockey. You have to answer a couple yes or no questions to get in, but we have great continued discussions as well there. And then every episode, we're done, including this one, available on your favorite podcast network or ourkidsplayhockey.com, where we also have some special deals for you if you're looking to support us, support the show, or support some people in the game. So without further ado, we want you to enjoy your week in hockey. We'll see you next time on Our Kids Play Hockey. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.